Now, as y'all have probably figured out, I there's times where I'll make a video and I'll say, here's some products and here's my thoughts on them and here's the ones I use. And then sometime later I'll go, oh, update on that. Well, that's what this vlog is going to be about. And I'm going to be talking about rattle can primers. Now, right from the start, I'll say, if you're ever not sure, if you're ever wondering, okay, I've heard John and I've heard other people say this and that and the other, if I'm not really sure what to believe, what's a fail-safe option, either one from something from Tamiya or something from Mr. Hobby, these are great. Yeah, they're more expensive, especially on a per ounce basis. But I have never, ever, ever had any reason to complain about the performance of either one of these products. So if you're not sure, then know that these can be the fallbacks anytime, and they're going to serve you well. However, I've had the opportunity to use a few others, so I wanted to share with you what those thoughts were. Now, along the way, I've just in the course of various projects, I wanted to use some primers from specific companies so that I could speak about them and feel like, okay, I've used them enough that I feel comfortable saying something about them one way or the other. I used this Army Painter primer. If you'll remember that speed paint video that I did and my thoughts on speed paints, I used the Army color primer for that, because what I saw is if you try to use speed paints, then Army Painter's answer is always, well, you have to use our primer. So I did use their primer. Didn't like the speed paints. Didn't like their primer either. It went on kind of blotchy, kind of grainy, not a real nice texture to it. I mean, it wasn't bad, but the whole appeal of Army Painter is supposed to be, well, it's a more budget conscious thing, but I didn't really find that for the money, that it was that much of, it just wasn't justified in my mind. The performance just wasn't good. I feel like this is like every other Army Painter product. I just feel like there's always an asterisk. If you use this and you like it, hey, I'm not saying don't use it. But my gold standard is stuff like this. And that's what I compare everything to. And this was just a no-go. So that's, I've got a friend who likes Army Painter stuff here in town. I'm probably just going to give that to him and go with it. Now, I also got a chance to try some Citadel primer. And keep in mind that both of these, I think really when I read the list of ingredients, they're not so much primer like this is a primer. It's more of a paint, but it has really good adhesion. And so for our purposes, it works like a primer. Anyway, I used the Citadel stuff and it worked good. It wasn't quite as smooth as Tamiya. Wasn't near as smooth as Mr. Mahogany or Mr. Hobby primer. But it was very good, and I liked it. I liked that there's a wide variety of colors. They work with the Citadel paints if you use those. Biggest drawback to these is this. It's a 10.4 ounce bottle. This was $20. They do love their primer. It's expensive stuff, and by comparison to Army Painter, I don't know that they list the ounces on here, but this is 296 grams, and this is 400 milliliters, and I'm not a metric system person, but I think that means there's more in here than there's more in here, by 104 hectares or something like that. So this is quite expensive per ounce. It's more on the order of this, which is 180 milliliters. So I think if you did a per milliliter comparison, then it's expensive like Tamiya. But I do feel confident in saying in my use of this that it seems like if this is what you have access to, if you want to try this, this is going to work well for you. All the caveats apply about don't want to get them confused about making quick passes over it from a certain distance and not letting it build up and run. I mean, that accounts. You can mess up a prime job with this if you don't follow those basic rules. So, and as with any of them, shake it up well. 2 minutes. Swirl it around like that down so the little ball is running around down at the bottom, and that'll get them good and mixed up. But I liked the performance of this. It's just way mad expensive. Now, as a follow-up on this stuff, I'd heard good things about it. I heard some mini painters saying this works really well. It's really cheap. This bottle was only like $3, 340 grams, so it's somewhere between the amount that you get from Army Painter and Citadel, and yet they're all the same size. I don't know how they do that. Anyway, I had used this on quite a few projects, and for a while I was saying, if budget is really a thing, this is not working bad. You just got to give it plenty of time to dry. But I've kind of changed my opinion on it based on the performance of priming some things. I found, it seems like in a vlog recently, I showed that I'd primed a lot of projects, that I'm getting them, prepared for the future. I primed all of those, and I used this. And I thought, well, I'll just have plenty of time, so I'll give them time to dry, and everything will be okay. Well, when I went back probably a week or two after that priming, I looked at it, and most of them were fine. It had dried to the point that you could touch it and not feel any tackiness. And to really test if it's cured and dry and if there's not going to be any tackiness, you may run your finger across it and it feels like it's dry. But if you just take, a miniature or any vehicle, anything you've primed, if you take it and just put your fingers on it like that for just 20 or 30 seconds, if when you release it, if there's any stick, it's not done yet. It's not cured. So 2 weeks appeared to be fine for almost all of the parts. But there were a few parts that were not only, everything else had gone matte. They were still glossy, which indicates that it's not cured, but it was still sticky, very sticky. So I began looking at the parts, and what it was, if you remember, I've talked a little bit about that mule transport from Mantic War Games. It was the tires and the guns, and they were still sticky and just weren't even close to being cured. I let them go for another 2 weeks. Their status didn't change. They stayed exactly the same. I ended up having to strip them down and I actually put some Badger Stynel res on them. My thinking is that there are some types of plastic that this does not work well with. The problem I had was when I examined the plastic that those tires were made of and that the guns were made of and that the vehicle itself was made of, I couldn't tell what the difference was. There wasn't any difference in stiffness. There wasn't any difference in feel. There wasn't any difference in the look of it. It all looked the same. So I feel like unless you're priming something with this that like if you're priming, say, Citadel miniatures, the newer plastic ones, and you prime it and it works well, then it's probably good to go for any of, I would say, their newer plastics. You can probably do well with it. But if you're not sure of the plastic, it may or may not work. And like I said, a month went by and that stuff never did cure. In fact, when I cleaned it off with the alcohol, it took a lot of cleaning to get that stuff off of there. And it had actually begun to degrade or soften the plastic. So this has been, for that reason, this has been relegated to putting it in our garage. And I've told my wife, if you want to use that for priming some of your, different projects that she likes doing, here's the caveats, be prepared for that. I'm sure on like wood or metal or something like that, it'll work fine, but certain plastics, it just doesn't seem to work. So this has gone the way of Army Painter. Now this is one that's fairly new to me. I've only had these a short while. I have been wanting to try these Vallejo. They just call them hobby paints. But everything I read online said they're great for priming. And so I got some and I've primed several models with them. And I have been really, really, really happy with these. Because for one, let me grab this over here. And it's, it's kind of hard to see because it's just black. But I primed this. This is part of that War Games diorama that I'm working on. It went on beautifully, very smooth, dried really, really fast. I mean, like I would get one side done and then go to the other side and then come around. By the time I got to this side here, it was already dry enough that I could touch my finger against it to kind of maneuver it around, and it was done. So it is really quick drying. The coverage is good. The color was good. Of course, since it dried so quick, I mean, I could pick it up in 10 minutes. I kind of scratched that a little bit with my finger. It seemed fairly durable. I've looked at the material safety data sheet, and this is not just their acrylic primer in a can. This is made of some more hot materials, things that end in xylene and toluene and all sorts of warnings about, if you look at it wrong, it's going to kill you. So it's usually when they give you all of these warnings, you're like, oh, that's a good primer there. What I like about this is it has 400 milliliters in the bottle, which is like this, more than this. At my local hobby shop, it was $13, which puts it in the category in terms of cost with this. So it's a much more affordable primer. They've got a lot of different colors. I've always felt like Tamiya was one of those products that you could say, okay, nobody ever, like the old IBM, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. I don't think anybody ever gets fired for buying Tamiya, and now I'm really feeling that way about Vallejo. Every product I've used from them, I like. I've thought their stuff is great. So I'm going to keep experimenting with it because I like to test stuff out. I've been testing this one for well over a year now. But I'm going to keep testing these. But right now, I'm thinking that unless something drastic happens, my future rattle can primer of choice is going to be Vallejo because there's a wide variety of colors. It's here. It's easy for me to get locally. I can tell my local hobby shop, hey, order me these colors, and they can have it there in about 3 days. It's $13 here, again, locally. Which is really good in terms of hobby-specific rattle can primers, and it works really well. So I felt like it went on as smooth as the Vallejo or the Tamiya surface primer. Not quite as smooth as Mr. Mahogany, but darn close. No complaints about that at all, especially given, again, the cost. But yeah, I'll let you know down the road, continued use of this, how this goes. But I honestly don't expect it to change because Vallejo is just such a good product. But anyway, just some thoughts on continued use of rattle can primers. And of course, if you prefer to blow it through an airbrush, I do that too. I've got Badger Stynel Res and Mr. Surfacer and things like that. There's nothing wrong with doing it through an airbrush. More and more, I'm just finding that the rattle cans are so fast and so convenient that I'm really liking them.